Greetings, friends. My name is Weston Nakamura from Blockworks Macro in Tokyo. At Asian Markets Close, welcome to the Market Depth Podcast, bringing you global market commentary and analysis from the Asia-Pacific trading session so that you know what happened overnight. Happy July 4th for my fellow Americans back at home. For me in Tokyo, I did have Shake Shack for 2 days in a row. That's my way of doing my part in celebrating the 4th. All right, so this is a big one for China. We have some major leadership changes underway at the very top of China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, PBOC, in which the vice governor of the PBOC, Pan Gongsheng, he has been elevated to the top spot of the central bank for a reshuffling of leadership right in the midst of this very make or break critical moment of policy for the Chinese and therefore the global economy, and of course with broader market implications as well. There's something far bigger going on than the PBOC leadership reshuffle, and that's being way overlooked. But basically, Beijing is essentially showing their hand, not by choice, of course, but by action. And that is one of distress and urgency, specifically as it relates to the currency meltdown, which in the past, call it week or so, has shoved its way to the front of the line of fires that need to be put out immediately. So much so that even the property sector, the raging dumpster fire that is by itself, even that needs to kind of stand aside for the moment in the immediate, because as massive and as widespread a bomb that the property sector risk is, a potential currency crisis would hit 100% of the population. All individuals, households, livelihoods, every single business, and of course the state sector itself. And although China may or may not even care, havoc in the yuan would have global market implications and impact, as we saw a small sample of in August of 2015 and the massive cross-asset global volatility explosions that had ensued from the yuan deval. Now, so what I'm saying right now is just based on my own view of the matter. It's based on a ton of digging around and conducting of analysis on the matter that I've done over the past several days to prep for this particular episode. So, like everything else, I can very well be 100% wrong, and we will see in time. But what matters in the here and now is that this angle and this approach is at least being presented to you, because it's being completely overlooked and missed by the broader consensus coverage out there in financial media. So as always, I'm just going to present this to you, and then you can do as you wish and apply it accordingly to your own respective framework, or you can say it's 100% nonsense, or otherwise, all that's fine. I don't really care. I just care that you at least heard me out, and that I appreciate your giving the time of day to do so. Okay, so today I will be going over who is this new head of the PBOC, but also what of the incumbents at the PBOC who just got axed. The people who were just reappointed to these positions in March of this year, just a few months ago. What changed since then? And just kind of the latest developments in this leadership change that's currently underway at the People's Bank of China. And then I'll also present my, I guess if you want to call it, alternative take of my own on the matter, that the current mainstream narrative and the broader financial media ecosystem is not at all covering, right? Particularly on this notion of the new guy being a so-called continuity candidate for the PBOC and its policy implications going forward. Look, fine. Like, that he very well may be, and that might be the case, and that is indeed important. But that is absolutely not what the headlines or the interpretations should be in the immediate as like the primary headline, okay? And I will show you exactly what I mean, but I'm also going to show you how the media coverage is completely missing this big picture, okay? So, because I have a ton to get through, I'm just going to play this clip from Steve Engel at Bloomberg. She's based in China and Hong Kong, just to kill two birds with one stone. One is to provide the overview itself of the news itself, and then number two, simultaneously to show you what overlooking and mistargeted attention from the media looks like.
You've been watching these developments, the succession plan itself, unsurprising. Is this the continuity candidate?
Yeah, he absolutely is. He's another policy wonk like Yi Gong, has a career banking background. He was also, a visiting professor, I believe, at Harvard and Cambridge. He has international experience. He's well regarded both internationally and domestic, and he has that commercial banking expertise. It is a continuity candidate. And it's interesting that he will be taking over as the party chief while Yi Gong still is the governor. We're hearing rumblings that perhaps the top leadership wants to consolidate that role back into a dual role, one individual being the party chief as well as the governor. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that Yi Gong and also the outgoing party chief Guo Shuqing didn't do their job. They're just simply at retirement age. Yi Gong is 65, Guo Shuqing is 66. This gentleman, Pan Gongsheng, is relatively young. He's 59. So he has a few more years. And again, the interesting part about this, though, as we all know, that Xi Jinping, as he consolidated his power at the Party Congress in October and November, essentially wants to put more party control over some of these state organs. Keep in mind, the PBOC reports directly into the State Council, which is obviously run by Li Qiang, the premier. Now, again, PBOC is not independent from the government and from the party. They have to take their cues from party leadership. The interesting thing about Pan Gongsheng is back in the party reshuffle at the Party Congress last autumn, he was left out of the 200-member standing committee. Guo Shuqing, the man he's replacing as the party chief of the PBOC, was a central committee member. So Pan Gongsheng, not a top party leader. So what does that mean? Does that mean the PBOC, if indeed Pan Gongsheng takes over in the dual role as governor and party chief, will the PBOC have less of a role, less of a say going forward as far as economic policy?
Let's talk a little bit about economic policy, right? I mean, you continue to say the word continuity. Does that mean perhaps more targeted lending and not necessarily the sort of massive monetary stimulus that markets have been waiting for?
This was a topic that we spoke about all week at the World Economic Forum down in Tianjin. I heard Zhu Min, who is the former deputy governor of the PBOC, former deputy managing director of the IMF. On Friday, he was on a panel and he says, look, stop thinking about massive stimulus. It's not going to happen. In his estimation, he's at Tsinghua University now. He's not in the government, but he is essentially saying China has very high debt already. We also heard on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, the London School of Economics professor Ke Yu-jin says there is enough room for stimulus, but the problem is that you need a massive stimulus in the millions, trillions of renminbi to have even a moderate effect on the economy.
Okay, so that's the basic summary of what's going on. By the way, I just want to say, for the record, I like Steve Engel. For many years, I've regarded him as a highly credible, useful, objective source of breaking matters out of China. Okay. However, Steve Engel is not a markets person himself. He's more of like a policy person, and so therefore you have someone who's going to miss the bigger picture tie-in that's going on. So this whole thing was first originally reported by the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, but then was, kind of confirmed officially by the state shortly thereafter. And so, Steve Engel goes through a lot of names and positions, shuffling around, and it might be kind of confusing. So what I did was I just put together like my own little org chart, if you will, graphic to run through and hopefully provide more clarity. And yes, I'm aware that I have like third grader PowerPoint aesthetics, so just bear with me on that. Okay, so on the left column, we have the three key actors in this saga, and I've listed them in order of authoritative command and power ranking. That's been the structure over the past several years until Xi Jinping's recent great reshuffling began, starting with the Party Congress last October of 2022, okay? So, at the top, we have Guo Shuqing. He is the previous incumbent and now outgoing Communist Party Secretary of the PBOC. Now, as Steve Engel mentioned in the clip, the PBOC is not an independent body from the government. It answers to the party, the Communist Party. Okay, so this role of Communist Party Chief Secretary of the PBOC, this is actually the most powerful political position at the central bank, and it carries more weight and influence than even the position of the governor of the PBOC, which is the next row down, Yi Gang. Yi Gang is the governor of the People's Bank of China since 2018, and he's been the public face of the central bank that we've all been, familiarized with over the last several years, if not decades, given his very international, personal presence. He speaks perfect English. He's very sharp and articulate. He has economics PhDs from, I think, University of Illinois, and he also, I think, he taught at Purdue University, and he's so very kind of Western Americanized. But anyway, so he's the PBOC governor, who we've been hearing from over the last 5+ years, right? Though it seems that that's no longer the case going forward. He will also be exiting his post. And then finally at the bottom, we have Pan Gongsheng, and he is the newly appointed head of the PBOC and is expected to shortly be in the role of the governor of the PBOC as well. Okay. But from 2012 until this past weekend, he had been the deputy governor of the PBOC. But he's also been holding other key roles simultaneously and currently as well, okay? Which, in my view, ultimately led to him currently getting rushed into this top spot at the PBOC underway right now. So Pan had also been the head of the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, otherwise known as SAFE, since 2016. SAFE is China's foreign exchange regulator, who basically oversees China's massive $3 trillion of foreign exchange reserves, i.e. he is basically tasked with at least attempting to manage the currency, especially in terms of price action and price levels where the yuan is trading, by whatever means he has at his disposal. Okay? And he not only has a few, kind of tools at his disposal that he can use, but he has had direct personal experience in using them. The full gamut of them over the years. What has he been doing in terms of, supporting or maintaining or overseeing the currency? Well, as I just mentioned, he has use of SAFE's FX reserves, okay? But he's also the guy who has been imposing and setting parameters around capital controls around China. He's also known as the guy who's been proactively squeezing speculative shorts in derivative markets. And, of course, jawboning, okay? He's danced on the graves of yuan shorts, and as I'll show you later, and he's been very vocal about the internationalization of the yuan as of late and other sort of aggressive public quotes of note. But the key point that I want you to remember here with Pan and his record is that he is an international markets guy. Okay, if not the foremost international markets guy within China's officials, both in practice and in reputation and in perception. Okay, keep this point in mind. He is a markets guy. He gets it, and he is perceived to get it. Okay, now to add to that, Pan also has a background in banking. Prior to his policy and regulatory career, he brought two of the big four state-owned banks. He brought them public via IPO, okay? That's a massive task to bring a state-owned bank to IPO in China. And just for those who don't know, of the 5 largest banks in the world by assets, the top 4 of the 5 largest are the big 4 Chinese state-owned banks. And then JP Morgan is number 5 in the world, okay? So 2 of the largest banks in the world he brought public. And then, to further add to his resume, he's also the one who had designed and carried out the now infamous 3 red lines from 2020, which had been implemented to rapidly and purposely strangle the Chinese property and development sectors and their highly leverage-dependent business models, okay? And then, as if that's not enough to also have his plate on his record, Pan is also the head of the leading group of Internet Financial Risks Remediation. And what do? They regulate fintech and crypto. Okay? So let's just start with crypto. 2017, as China first started their crackdown on crypto, Pan said, quote, "If you sit by the river and watch, one day the corpse of Bitcoin will float in front of you." Now, whatever you want to make of that quote, fine. Doesn't matter. I don't really care. What matters to me is just two things to pull from that. Number one, before anyone gets like emotional about this, about that quote in itself, that comment isn't about crypto or Bitcoin. He doesn't care about those things either way, before or against Bitcoin or crypto itself. That was a strategic comment made of capital controls and preventing capital flight at that time in 2017, which Bitcoin provided an avenue to flee the yuan. So he's going to trash that avenue to try to trap capital inside China. And not because he has some sort of like actual concern about the speculative risk of BTC and volatility for like Chinese citizens' portfolios or whatever. Okay. Second takeaway from that quote about Bitcoin corpse or whatever floating in front of you is simply that this is yet another example of the types of aggressive public statements that he makes. And like this is his style, right? And thereby we should be ready to expect, I guess, very aggressive potential commentary coming out of the central bank under his leadership. So don't get thrown off by that if suddenly the PBOC starts talking about corpses floating around rivers and whatnot. Okay? In addition to Bitcoin and crypto, he's also been behind the big tech crackdown that we saw occurring in 2021. The Alibaba, Tencent, Meituans, JDs, and so on and so forth, right? He's also behind that, okay? So he's behind the tech and crypto crackdown, the property sector crackdown. He's been a leader in the broader anti-corruption drive and far more. So in addition to being a markets guy, he's also a guy who follows the party line, whatever that may be at the moment. And even if the party line should change, he will change along with it, as per all of the aforementioned things, now having seemingly flipped on its head from his efforts at the time, right? The tech platform crackdown of 2020, 2021, that's now turned around and is currently the stance is, to be one of, support of the platform economy. Crypto making like a resurgence in Hong Kong as we speak. Property sector crackdown that spearheaded China's broader economic deterioration alongside zero COVID, of course. But the property sector, 3 red lines, deleveraging hammer, that's been replaced by a Band-Aid or whatever. But that's basically has turned around as well, okay? So, does this make Pan a failure, or does it make him a success for carrying out orders with vigor and authority? Well, the answer to that isn't simple at all, and we'll get back to it. But for now, that's who Pan is, okay? That's who the new head of the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, is, okay? So, all 3 of these guys, Guo Shuqing, Yigang, and then Pan Gongsheng himself, they were all senior level officials, and all 3, they were instrumental figures within the party, and Yigang in particular had been a Xi loyalist. But in 2022, last year, at the China Party Congress, in which Xi had secured his 3rd term, when the 200-member list of the Central Committee, the Standing Committee, was unveiled, all 3 of these guys had been surprisingly dropped from the Central Committee membership. Even Yigang, which came as a surprise because, as I mentioned, he was a Xi Jinping loyalist. But despite being dropped from their Central Committee memberships, all 3 of them were kept in their roles, as in like they were actively reappointed after these exclusions from the Standing Committee, right? And Yigang, he had finished his 5-year tenure as the governor of the PBOC, and then he was reappointed to serve another term in March of this year. This was just 3-4 months ago. Okay, and I'm going to get into this part more in depth later, but I just want to quickly show you a sample of the media coverage at that time, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, in March of this year. Okay, these are some of the headlines from March 12th, 2023, from the National People's Congress, in which Xi Jinping had reappointed Yigang as governor of the People's Bank of China, despite having dropped him from the Standing Committee list in October of last year. And yes, I have the word continuity underlined here, but just put that aside for now. And just look at the broader kind of headlines. Do any of these headlines, by the way, they're by and large, all of them look more or less the same. Do any of these headlines give an impression that Yi Gang's reappointment in March 2023 was supposed to be some sort of like temporary place filler for a few months until somebody else emerges? No. Okay. The reading at the time was that Xi is retaining his existing economic team, at least these positions, right? Despite expectations of a shakeup, according to FT, right? I.e., expected shakeup has been averted for the sake of continuity. Okay, so let's just fast forward a bit to present day, to this past weekend. And we have Guo Shuqing, the PBOC party chief, out. And that role has now been given to Pan. And on the same day, Yi Gang, PBOC governor, he's also out. And the assumption is that Pan will also be appointed the governor position at PBOC in place of Yi Gang's exit. Okay? And thereby consolidating both the role of the governor and party chief at the People's Bank of China, which had been the kind of prior norm of having a dual role, as well as these other roles, especially the director of SAFE, the state FX body. Okay, so Pan has basically now elevated to party secretary at the PBOC as Guo Shuqing gets shoved out. And the expectation is that, with Yi Gang now also already out of the governor's role, that role will also go to Pan, and thereby consolidate the party secretary role plus the governor's role at the PBOC, as per what had been more or less a typical norm of both roles under one person, going as far back as 1995 in sort of modern terms. Okay, all right. So I hope that this sort of helped clarify with the names and the roles and all of the kind of reshuffling taking place. Okay, all right. So now let's take a look at how financial media, particularly Western financial media, has been reporting this. First of all, the FT headline is probably the most embarrassing miss of all of the big picture headlines amongst all of them. Not that it's true or untrue or whatever, but that just absolute zero value and insight provided. Not that the others are much better, but just take a look at the consensus reading of this. Okay, so nothing about Yi Gang's exit, nor about Pan's FX markets involvement and expertise amidst a crumbling Yuan happening simultaneously, nor the question of simply why and why now is this taking place. And rather, the consensus message or coverage message is simply Pan Gongsheng is a continuity candidate, right? That's what the broad consensus coverage is. Continuity candidate. We have a new PBOC head, and he's a continuity candidate. Now, here's why that in and of itself is very stupid. Here is once again the headlines from March 2023, when Yi Gang, the guy who was just shoved out 3 months after being reappointed, this is from when he was reappointed in March of 2023. And what were the headlines then? Yi Gang's reappointment in March 2023 is continuity. Okay, that's what it was just a few months ago. Reuters, March 12th, 2023. Quote, China chooses continuity, retaining central bank chief. FT, March 12th, 2023. Xi Jinping retains China's central bank head in boost to markets. President opts for greater continuity on the economic team, despite expectations of a shakeup. Okay, so those headlines, those were legitimate for that moment, right? That Xi Jinping had reappointed those that were dropped from the standing committee in October, like Yi Gang, reappointed as the governor of the PBOC. That signals policy continuity amidst tough economic, challenges. It just signals stability and familiarity to markets. Okay. All right. So, but then if that's the case, then less than 4 months later, when these continuity incumbents suddenly get axed on a Saturday at the beginning of July, why in the hell would the headlines and consensus narratives be of continuity to report on this sudden leadership change? Why would the headline message be the same thing as it was in March? Right? Like, sorry, I don't mean to pick on Bloomberg specifically this episode, but they're being especially stupid on this, and so I have to show you to compare and contrast, March and July. March 12th, and by the way, these should say March 2023 and July 2023. That's my mess up on the side there. But March 12th, this is when Yi Gang is reappointed to be governor of the People's Bank of China. Okay, Bloomberg says, quote, China signals stability with surprise move to keep PBOC governor. Stability with a surprise? That sounds like a contradiction within its own headline. Okay, but fine, whatever. All right, so that was March of 2023. And then now, if you just fast forward to current times, July of 2023, when this newly reappointed stability continuity PBOC governor of Yi Gang, when that guy is sacked after 3 months, the Bloomberg headline today is Xi's central bank shakeup prioritizes continuity over change. And again, with this headline itself, a shakeup is prioritizing continuity over change. Isn't a shakeup a change? Okay, and so here is the thing with all of this nonsense work from the media. First, where are they getting this continuity word, this talking point? I don't know. But I do know that China party officials themselves are labeling all of this with the word continuity, starting with the announcement itself. So maybe from that. Most likely from that. I'm not saying that they're being dictated to use that term. I'm saying that they're just being lazy. They're copy-paste media reporting, okay? But that aside, even at the most basic level, how would any change from what was continuity just 3 months ago be continuity today upon change? If they wanted to prioritize continuity, especially during these trying times, why not keep Yi Gang on, as per your reappointment in March of 2023, even or especially despite being dropped from the standing committee list in October? Is this new PBOC chief somehow more Yi Gangy than Yi Gang himself? Right? So now the other consensus, okay, and the only narrative explanation as to what happened to guys like Guo and Yi Gang, right, is that they are above retirement age at 65 and 66 respectively, as per what Steve Engel had also said in that clip from earlier, right? They hadn't done anything particularly wrong, and they're just at retirement age. Okay. This, too, is nonsense. Come on, Steve Engel, you're far better than that. Is it really a retirement age matter? Were Yi Gang and Guo Shuqing, 20 years younger in March 2023 upon their reappointments? Because clearly they were reappointed despite their retirement ages. Their ages had been known. They were reappointed anyway, which means that factor didn't matter or wasn't enough of a factor to prevent their reappointments 3 months ago in March. But now the retirement age is an issue? When the economic picture is far worse? Now is when the retirement age factor takes more of a higher priority than actual need for policy continuity and stability? Why? Really? Why? No. Okay? No, this is just clearly idiotic, right? It's just incredibly lazy read of what's actually going on. Okay? That's what I'm saying. So, what's actually going on? What actually did change between March 2023 reappointments and July 1st bootings of these guys out of the central bank? Well, I don't know for sure, but I think it might be, markets and economy related. More so than birthdays and retirement parties of two guys. Okay? So, now that you're caught up with the latest developments and the head changes at the People's Bank of China, as well as being caught up with what the nonsense talking points of consensus are out there, here's my personal analysis and view of what's really going on with the People's Bank of China and China policy action more broadly speaking. China is currently in panic mode, if not battle mode, focused on their deteriorating currency, the yuan. And Pan, this new guy, is not a continuity candidate. He is a yuan stop-loss candidate. Meaning, Pan, he is there for one immediate and urgent reason. Do something about the yuan before it truly collapses. We are at critical levels on dollar yuan, USD CNH, USD CNY. If that currency pair breaks meaningfully through 7.3, then it would be a breakout to a new 15-year low on the yuan, as opposed to just having it currently being, last year's low. Okay? And although Chinese assets are taking a beating all year, the yuan in particular is really getting hammered. Okay, so see this chart of the Hang Seng Index versus the yuan. Hang Seng at least finds some sort of support recently, temporary or otherwise, but just look at the yuan is just one directional downwards. One of the factors being yield spreads or policy divergences, right? That's kind of the same issue that's killing the Japanese yen currently as we speak. But the difference between the Japanese yen weakness and the Chinese yuan weakness on the policy divergence front is that Japan has been on autopilot easing mode with yield curve control, or in other words, Japan's easing is relatively static and standstill against the sharply tightening rest of the world. And so yield spreads diverge, and the yen weakness is more of a function of other currencies strengthening as much as it is yen. But in China's case, the policy easing is not static or unchanged, right? But rather it is getting, or expect to get, more loose actively, while the rest of the world is going the opposite way. And so with China, you have two parts moving in two directions. China is stepping up easing and the world is tightening. It's not Japan's unchanged easing as the world tightens sort of situation. Okay, that's the difference in terms of policy spread and nominal yield spreads. And so here's dollar yuan from 2022 till now, inverse, and I've just drawn a line at the 7 handle. Now remember, I keep saying that the yuan is a barometer of what's going on with the big picture in China financially and economically and all that, right? If you just look at this chart tells you the story of why Xi Jinping and the leadership is seemingly so back and forth about his appointments and stuff like that, okay, as it relates to his economic team and the central bank. So just going back to this table, if we look at this alongside the yuan chart, it explains what happens in this table. Okay, so October of 2022, China Party Congress. Xi Jinping secures his spot for China ruler for life. But this is when, people are being added and dropped from the very coveted 200-member party committee list, right? And look at the destruction in the yuan that took place, not just at the time of the party congress itself, but all year long. And so when it's time for party congress and to reveal the list of who had made this list and who got dropped, that's why the 3 from the PBOC got dropped from the Central Committee. And it didn't matter if you were a Xi loyalist like Yigang or just a party agenda follower like Pan or whoever. If you let the yuan get crushed by 15% in 6 months when it previously stayed in a tight and steady plus minus 2% trading band for years prior, then you are not going to be a privileged insider. Okay, now let's fast forward from Party Congress in October of 2022 to March 2023, which is the National People's Congress. And look at that. Between those months, the China reopened trade had taken place and not yet died, and dollar yuan was now back below the 7 handle and had been restabilizing. So that's why you get reappointments at the National People's Congress in March of 2023 for those from the PBOC who were left off of the Central Committee list in October of 2022, because it was a very different market at those respective times. Okay. But then what happened from the National People's Congress in March 2023 until current July 2023? Well, the yuan dives one directional downward and now back well through the 7 handle once again. And over the past, say, week and a half or so, despite seemingly nothing of any substance happening with stimulus support out of China, policymakers out of China have actually been pulling out many different tactics to try and stem the yuan's decline, okay? That's what's different this time. These active measures that are being taken currently in response to or in defense of the currency, all right? Now, first line of defense is the PBOC's daily yuan fixing rates that are conducted at 9:15 a.m. every single day. It's 15 minutes before cash equity open. This is when the PBOC sets the midpoint trading range for the plus minus 2% daily trading band that dollar CNY can fluctuate within before they step in and intervene into to FX markets. Okay, and this midpoint rate is derived from like a black box formula, but it's heavily influenced by the previous day's closing price. So let's say they wanted to get the yuan to be stronger for the following morning's fixing on any given day. They'll get, say, one of the state banks to just bid up the market into the close for a higher close print to then reference off of for a higher yuan midpoint fix the next morning. Okay. And then also every morning before the daily midpoint fixing rate is revealed, there are surveys of market players that are taken by like Reuters, by Bloomberg, and others, and they basically kind of aggregate an average. The estimate is, the consensus estimate is where market participants think that the yuan midpoint fix will come out for that day. And so what the PBOC does in order to signal their desire for a stronger or weaker yuan is they will set the fixing way out of line above or below whatever the consensus expectations are. Okay, so if you look at this chart from Bloomberg, those like kind of black bars that you see as of late, that's like the delta, the difference between the market estimate expectations of where the daily fix will be and where the PBOC actually sets the midpoint fix rate at. And as you can see, in the past several trading days, the PBOC has been very deliberate and very openly signaling for a stronger yuan, far more so than they have at any point this year. Now, these sort of like 100, 200, 300 pips stronger fixes, they are significant. They are not insignificant by any means, okay? But they're really kind of nothing compared to some of the ranges that we saw in 2022. They were like double or more that these currently are, and consecutively. Okay. Nonetheless, though, daily yuan fixing is the first line of defense of the yuan, and that's been out in full force as of late, and to little or no avail. So, what else has China been doing? Well, in the past few days, they've been doing a bunch of things. They've been directing state banks to sell dollars and buy yuan, as I mentioned before. Okay. They're also conducting these surveys, right, more frequently and more often. And then this headline caught my eye. JP Morgan research calling for a possible circuit breaker needed to stop the yuan self-reinforcing downward spiral. I don't like to think that that's going to happen, but the fact that they threw that out there shows that their policy tools are, first of all, being deployed, and secondly, they are not working. And so they need something new. And by the way, these measures of dollar selling and yuan buying and yuan surveying, all of that would be under the sort of watch and the jurisdiction of the newly appointed PBOC head, Pan, from his position at the head of SAFE, the Forex Reserves and Currency Management and all that, which is now rolled into one position at the PBOC altogether. Okay? Is that a coincidence? No, it's not. This is why Pan Gongsheng got suddenly shoved into the position at the top of the PBOC at this moment, to consolidating all of his FX overseeing roles, as well as his prior experience battling yuan sellers on Capital Flight, and also having a record of just obediently following whatever marching orders are given, and then executing on them regardless of outcome, and aggressively so and decisively so. And this is also why Yigang and Guo Shuqing had to go, and had to go now. And it's not because of their so-called retirement age, which again, it wasn't an issue 3 months ago when dollar yuan had a 6 handle on it, rather than being on the precipice of breaking into a new 15-year low. that's when I guess the retirement age, quote unquote, would matter. Another point on this retirement age, this whole like retirement age requirement thing, right? Pan Gongsheng is basically 59 years old, and so he's apparently being rushed through the confirmation process ASAP in order to take the helm at the head of the PBOC, because his 60th birthday is next week, and therefore he would also be cutting it super close to this all-important retirement age. And heavens, wouldn't that be a disaster if he's not confirmed and slips in before his 60th date of birth? Just being clear examples how nonsense this retirement excuse is for their appointments, reappointments, and subsequent dismissal actions, despite financial media actually believing and citing this retirement reason.
It is a continuity candidate. Again, it doesn't necessarily, mean that Yi Gang and also the outgoing party chief, Guo Shuqing, didn't do their job. They're just simply at retirement age. Yi Gang is 65, Guo Shuqing is 66. This gentleman, Pan Gongsheng, is relatively young. He's 59.
When I heard about the need to get Pan Gongsheng in before his 60th birthday next week, and the level of granularity that they're abiding to, down to the very day, whereas for Yi Gang and for Guo Shuqing, who are off by years and still reappointed, i.e. they are clearly flexible with the so-called retirement line in the sand at best, and so they need to get Pan in ASAP due to his birthday next week for that reason. That confirms to me that this whole retirement age thing is just nonsense. Once again, made evident by yet another example in practice. And more importantly, it shows the time urgency that they're, at the very least, perceiving to be under, and that they're hiding. They need him in ASAP. And it's not because of his birthday, okay? Now, the one thing I can concede on regarding with the time and the kind of ASAP urgency that this is moving at is Janet Yellen's trip to China coming up, and the need to have that guy in place for her, for whatever reason that may be. But I don't think that that's much of a factor, of a contributor to the rushing of Pan Gongsheng into the consolidated head of the PBOC and safe as the day-to-day or even intraday currency concerns are. Like, I don't think it even compares to that level. And it's most certainly not a complete leadership overhaul at the top of the central bank because of Janet Yellen's trip alone, in case anyone's thinking that that was a reason. Okay? So, Yellen's trip to China has somewhere between a little bit to absolutely zero to do with the PBOC overhaul move. Either way, the alarm over the currency is really what's driving this. Currency has just basically completely hijacked the focus and attention and urgency of Chinese officials over the last several days, okay? And I don't know if it's just like a price level thing specifically, or if there are broader knock-on implications that they see that we don't see, that, a runaway weak yuan would trigger, that they're desperately trying to prevent, but they're clearly just desperately trying to prevent something. They're trying to throw everything at the fire as possible right now before something truly horrendous happens. What's happening right now is not the truly horrendous thing. They're trying to keep whatever the hell that is away. This is also why they likely can't aggressively stimulate right now either, despite everyone calling for it, expecting it, and all that, because that would further weaken the yuan, and yuan stability is of paramount importance at this moment in their eyes. And you could tell like what their priorities are. Like, just look at state media coverage out of China. It's very FX oriented. It's very yuan weakness oriented. It's almost up to obsessive level. Okay, this is from June 26th. This is before like the reshuffling and all of that happening, right? And by the way, yuan weakness did persist. So whoever these quote unquote experts were that the Global Times is talking about, yeah, didn't work. And as I mentioned, Wall Street Journal was the one who first kind of talked about this. Then the official word came out itself, because the Wall Street Journal kind of missed the point or didn't deliver how they hoped. They were just very down the middle about this. Look at how the Global Times has covered this. Central bank funds promoted to party committee could boost Yuan. I mean, do I need to say any more about what is behind this promotion? Like, why does that have to be in the title? Because clearly that's what they're obsessively watching. And then I have this like section of it, right, from October of 2018. Okay, this is from what Pan said, and this is he's saying this from the stance of being in this position of the director of SAFE and overlooking the currency and capital flight, FX reserves, all that. Quote: in recent years, PBC, the People's Bank of China, PBC and SAFE have accumulated rich experience and policy tools in dealing with exchange rate and foreign exchange market fluctuations. We have crossed paths with those who attempt to short the yuan a few years ago, and we are familiar with each other. I believe our memories are still fresh, Pan said. So he's like I don't know, he's like a Hulk Hogan type of character. No, I don't really know, but he's a tough guy. Okay, like as opposed to take Governor Kuroda from the Bank of Japan, for example, who would just like murder widows, right, left and right all day with those who were trying to short the JGB market. He is not necessarily a grave dancer per se, or like he wouldn't necessarily be verbally strong, but this guy is not. That's not his style. This guy is very aggressive. So be aware that you have a kind of and then especially compared to Yi Gang as well. Yi Gang is very almost professorial because he was a professor in the way he talks when he talks, and that's not very often. I have a feeling that you're going to hear a lot more out of the People's Bank of China, and I think that you're going to get a very different attitude out of the People's Bank of China, and so just be aware of that. And the more that happens, the more that it's going to signal that things are not well. The more that they talk about how this should be good for the yuan, and we have crossed paths with those who attempt to short the yuan a few years ago, and we are familiar with each other. Memories still fresh. I can still taste their blood. Blah blah blah. Whatever it is that he says. The more that they do that, the more it signals that their their problems are persisting, if not getting worse. So that is the signal that is critical to try to figure out and to watch. Okay. So that's it for me. That's what I wanted to share. In terms of like a market view or anything like that, I don't have one. Why? Because I can't make one. Why can't I make one? Because I have no idea what this guy and what the party is going to do or not do, when, how, under what conditions, let alone market reaction. Okay? I have no idea about any of those things. So there's no market call right now. If dollar yuan, let's say, just stays like steady from here, it doesn't mean that everything that I just said is nonsense, by the way. It could actually mean that they are firing on all fronts, and that's why it's steady. And if not for that, dollar yuan might be at 10 or something. Okay, so we don't know what they're doing, and we don't know to what level of impact whatever they are doing or aren't doing is actually having. But what we do know is that they are taking very decisive, clear measures on one market or one asset class, the Chinese yuan. Currently, right? And everything else is almost being tossed aside at the moment. And if they're that concerned to that level where they're making leadership changes so suddenly and so drastically and with full kind of gamut behind it with the state media and all of these other yuan fixings, all that stuff, right? Everything behind it. If they're that concerned, then we all should probably be concerned that they're that concerned, even if we don't know exactly why they are that concerned and where it's going to spill out. So I hope that this was helpful or will be helpful going forward, and I will obviously keep you all updated as new things sort of develop, but just be aware that this is happening. That's all, okay? On behalf of Blockworks Macro, my name is Weston Nakamura. Thank you for your time, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Bye.